When my sister Victoria moved into the family home that I paid for, my parents told my husband James and me to move out because she was dealing with severe depression and real family makes sacrifices, completely ignoring that I had just gotten back from my own hospitalization for burnout. I discovered through Instagram that her depression started exactly when her rich boyfriend Brandon broke up with her and she had to leave his penthouse in Miami. And the pool party photos she was posting daily didn't match someone who could barely get out of bed. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom, watching my mother hang Victoria's designer clothes in my closet, while my father carried in her third suitcase of shoes. The bedroom I had carefully decorated after years of saving. The house I had put $180 down on when my parents were facing foreclosure 4 years ago. "Rebecca, you're blocking the doorway," my mother said without looking at me, her tone suggesting I was the inconvenience. "Tori needs to get settled. The lighting in here is better for her morning routine." My morning routine had involved swallowing anti-anxiety medication and forcing myself to eat something, anything. After 3 months of running a hospital department through a staffing crisis that had landed me in the cardiac unit with stress-induced symptoms that mimicked a heart attack, I'd been home for exactly 9 days. "Mom, I just got out of the hospital," I said quietly, my hands still shaking slightly from the new medication. "I need to rest." The doctor said, "Your sister is going through a real crisis," my father interrupted, huffing as he set down a vanity case that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "She can barely function right now. You're young and healthy. You can handle a little disruption." Young and healthy. I had lost 23 pounds in 3 months. I couldn't sleep without medication. I had panic attacks in grocery store parking lots. But apparently, none of that qualified as a real crisis because I didn't post about it on Instagram with the right filter. Victoria appeared in the hallway, her honey blonde hair perfectly styled in beach waves, wearing athleisure that cost more than my work wardrobe. She gave me a sad little smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Becca, I'm so grateful you understand," she said, her voice taking on that breathy quality she used in her videos. "I just need a few weeks to get my head together. This breakup has destroyed me." I watched her scroll through her phone, her manicured nails clicking against the screen. Her Instagram was open. The most recent post from 2 hours ago showed her at a trendy brunch spot downtown with the caption, "Self-Care Sunday, learning to love myself again." She had 247 comments calling her brave and strong. "Where are James and I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "You have options," my father said dismissively, already walking past me with another load. "You're both working. Get a hotel for a bit. Tori can't be around people right now. She needs peace and quiet." The irony wasn't lost on me. The house was in my name, only my name. When my parents had been 60 days from losing their home of 30 years, I had liquidated my retirement account, took out a personal loan, and bought the house outright, allowing them to stay as long as they needed. James and I had moved in 6 months ago after my mother begged us to, saying she felt safer with young people in the house, that it was too big for just them and my dad's health was declining. Now I was being evicted from my own property so my sister could recover from losing her meal ticket. "This is my house," I said, and I watched all 3 of them freeze. "My name is on the deed. I paid for it." My mother's face hardened in a way I'd seen 1,000 times growing up, the look that said I was being selfish, difficult, not the daughter she raised. "And we raised you for 18 years, fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. I guess we should have kept a running tab." The words hit exactly as she'd intended. The unspoken accusation that I was throwing my financial contribution in their faces, that I was keeping score, that I wasn't grateful enough for the bare minimum of parental obligation. Victoria sighed dramatically, her hand pressed to her chest. I knew I was being a burden. I should just go back to that awful apartment and deal with everything alone. "I'm sorry I exist." She was good. She had always been good at playing the victim in a way that made everyone else the villain. When we were kids, she'd break something of mine and then cry that she was clumsy and didn't mean it, and I'd be lectured about being more forgiving. The pattern had never changed, just gotten more expensive. "No one's saying that," my father said quickly, shooting me a warning glare. "Rebecca was just being thoughtless. She's going to apologize." I looked at James, who stood in the hallway with our weekend bags, his jaw tight with controlled anger. We'd been married for 5 years, and in that time, he'd watched my family take and take and take. This was apparently the final straw. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get out of here." As we walked to our car, I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. Victoria's profile was public, followed by 47,000 people who believed every carefully crafted post. I scrolled through the last 2 weeks of her severe depression. Pool party with friends, champagne brunch, shopping haul video, yacht day with the crew, sunset cocktails, designer gym selfie, professional photo shoot in a flower field. Not a single post that suggested someone who could barely function. Not one hint of the devastation she'd described to our parents in the tearful phone call that had triggered this entire situation. I screenshot every post, every caption, every timestamp. Then I checked the property records on my phone, pulling up the deed that showed my name and only my name as the legal owner of 2847 Maple Ridge Drive. "What are you doing?" James asked as he started the car. "Research," I said calmly, my hands finally steady for the first time in weeks. "I want to make sure I understand exactly what's happening here." He glanced at the screenshots on my phone and then at me, something like relief crossing his face. "You're not going to let this go, would you?" I asked. Not for a second. That night, in a sterile extended-stay hotel room that cost $89 a night, I created a new document on my laptop. I titled it simply, Timeline. Then I began compiling every piece of evidence I had. Every text message from my parents, every Instagram post from Victoria, every bank statement showing my contributions to the house, every medical bill from my hospitalization. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "I hope you're happy. Your sister cried herself to sleep because of your outburst. Family is supposed to support each other, Rebecca. I raised you better than this." I stared at the message for a long moment, then replied with a single sentence. "You're absolutely right, Mom. Family should support each other." I didn't add what I was thinking, that she was about to learn exactly what kind of support I was capable of providing. The extended stay hotel had thin walls and flickering fluorescent lights that made my headaches worse. James spent his evenings sitting at the cramped desk, running calculations on his laptop, how long we could afford this, what our options were, whether we should just find an apartment and walk away from the house entirely. I spent my evenings building my case. On day 3, I called my real estate attorney, Patricia Chen, who had handled the purchase of the house. She listened without interrupting as I explained the situation. "You want them out?" she said when I finished. It wasn't a question. "I want what's legally mine," I replied. "And I want to do this correctly. You're the sole owner. Your parents have been living there as your guests. Your sister has been there less than a week. Legally, you can issue them a 30-day notice to vacate." She paused. "Rebecca, are you sure about this? Family disputes get ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "I'm just making sure I'm protected." That same afternoon, I contacted a private investigator my colleague had used during her divorce. His name was Donald Wright, and he specialized in social media forensics and surveillance. His rates were steep, $150 an hour, but James had insisted we use our emergency fund if necessary. "What exactly are you looking for?" Donald asked during our phone consultation. "Proof that my sister isn't experiencing the severe depression she's claiming. Proof that she's been lying to manipulate my parents into giving her free housing." That's pretty easy if she's active on social media. Most people don't realize that Instagram embeds location data and timestamps that can be cross-referenced. If she's claiming she can't leave the house but posting from restaurants, we'll find it. "There's more," I said. "I want to know about her financial situation. Her ex-boyfriend is Brandon Castellano. He's a real estate developer in Miami. I want to know why they broke up and whether there's anything that proves she's not actually in crisis." Donald was quiet for a moment. "Brandon Castellano. That's a name I know. Give me 48 hours." While I waited, I started documenting everything happening at my house. I drove by twice daily, parking down the street and photographing the activity. Victoria's white Mercedes SUV, a gift from Brandon that she'd somehow managed to keep, was rarely in the driveway. When it was there, her Instagram showed her having a quiet day at home, with photos taken in my living room, using my furniture as props for her depression recovery journey. Her followers ate it up. The comments were filled with heart emojis and messages of support. "You're so brave. Take all the time you need. Real healing happens in stillness." Except the metadata on her photos told a different story. The quiet day at home photo had been taken at 2:47 p.m. on Tuesday. Her Instagram story from the same day showed her at a hot yoga class at 3:15 p.m., then shopping at Nordstrom at 4:30 p.m., then having dinner at a high-end sushi restaurant at 7 p.m. She wasn't even good at lying. She was just confident that no one would check. On day 5, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. "Rebecca, I think we need to talk," she said, her voice careful in a way that set off alarm bells. Your father and I have been discussing things, and we realize this situation isn't fair to you. Hope flickered dangerously in my chest. Okay. We think the best solution is for you to sign the house over to us officially. That way, there's no confusion about who lives there, and you and James can move on with your lives without this hanging over you. The hope died instantly, replaced by something colder. You want me to give you my house. It was our house first, she said, and there was steel in her voice now. We lived there for 30 years before you came in with your money and your paperwork. You saved it from foreclosure and we're grateful, but it's still our home, our memories. Your sister needs stability right now, and you're creating chaos by making everyone feel like guests. I am the legal owner, I said slowly, making sure every word was clear. I paid $180 to save that house. I took out loans that I'm still repaying. James and I were planning to start a family there. And you still can, somewhere else. You're young, you have good jobs, you can buy another house. We're old, Rebecca. We can't start over. Neither can I, Mom. I used my entire retirement fund. I'm in debt. I just got out of the hospital because my job nearly killed me, and instead of helping me recover, you kicked me out of my own house for Victoria. Stop being so dramatic. You're not dying. Your sister is genuinely suffering. From what? I interrupted. From losing her boyfriend's credit card? From having to actually pay rent? From the devastating tragedy of being single? My mother's voice turned icy. I didn't raise you to be cruel. No, you raised me to be convenient. To fix problems and not complain and sacrifice everything so Victoria could have whatever she wanted. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from medication. I'm done being convenient. She hung up. 3 minutes later, I received a text from my father. Your mother is very upset. You need to apologize and stop acting like a landlord. Family doesn't treat family this way. I forwarded the text to Patricia Chen with a message. How fast can you draft that 30-day notice? Donald Wright called me on day 7 with his preliminary findings. We met at a coffee shop near the hotel, where he spread out a folder of printed documents across the table between us. Your sister is a piece of work, he said without preamble. Let's start with the ex-boyfriend. Brandon Castellano didn't just break up with her, he threw her out. Literally. Had his lawyer serve her with a trespassing notice when she wouldn't leave his penthouse voluntarily. I leaned forward. Why? She stole from him, ran up $67 dollars in charges on his credit cards, designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, a trip to Paris with friends where she stayed in a $2 a night hotel. He noticed when his business accountant flagged the unusual expenses. When he confronted her, she claimed they were gifts, that he'd told her to use the cards freely. He had texts proving otherwise. He'd given her a card for emergencies only. Donald slid several printed screenshots across the table. They showed text messages between Victoria and Brandon, where he explicitly stated the card was for emergencies like if your car breaks down or you have a medical issue. Her response, got it, thank you, baby. The next image showed the credit card statement. Chanel, Gucci, 4-star restaurants, first-class plane tickets, luxury hotels. He threatened to press charges, Donald continued. Her lawyer negotiated a deal. She'd pay back the money in installments and disappear from his life, or he'd go to the police. She signed the agreement 3 days before she showed up at your parents' house claiming depression. She owes him $67,000, I asked. Technically, yes, but according to my source, she hasn't made a single payment. The first one was due 2 weeks ago. His lawyer is preparing to file charges. I sat back, processing this. What else? Her Instagram income has dried up. 2 of her major sponsors dropped her last month. Apparently, Brandon had connections that helped her get those contracts. And when word got out about the theft, the brands quietly cut ties. She's been deleting comments from people asking why she's not promoting certain products anymore. Donald pulled out another document. Here's where it gets interesting. She's been applying for credit cards under your parents' address. 4 applications in the last 10 days, all denied because her credit score is 547. She's got collections agencies after her for unpaid bills from Miami, rent she skipped out on before moving in with Brandon, a car payment she defaulted on, medical bills she never paid. So she's broke, in debt, and potentially facing criminal charges, I summarized. And she's using your house and your parents' sympathy as a free hiding place while she figures out her next move. Donald closed the folder. I'd bet money she's already looking for her next wealthy boyfriend. That's her pattern. She finds someone with money, attaches herself, and drains them until they wise up. I thought about my parents, living on their fixed retirement income, believing they were helping their youngest daughter through a mental health crisis. I thought about how easily Victoria had lied to them, how readily they'd believed her, how quickly they'd turned on me to accommodate her. Can you compile all of this into a formal report? I asked. Already done. I'll email it to you tonight. Donald hesitated. Rebecca, I don't usually give personal advice, but I've seen a lot of these family situations. Whatever you're planning to do it fast. People like your sister don't just move on, they dig in. The longer she's in that house, the harder she'll be to remove. That night, I received 3 documents via email. Donald's full investigative report, Patricia Chen's draft of the 30-day eviction notice, and a text from James that simply said, "Whatever you're planning, I'm with you." I opened my laptop and began drafting an email. The subject line was simple: family meeting. The recipients were my parents, Victoria, and, after a moment's consideration, my Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister who had always been the family's voice of reason, and my Uncle Thomas, my father's brother who was a retired judge. The email was brief. I need to discuss the living situation at 2847 Maple Ridge Drive. This Sunday, 2 p.m. at the house. Attendance is mandatory. I'll be bringing documentation that everyone needs to see. My mother called within 5 minutes. I didn't answer. She called 4 more times. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, she texted, "What is this about?" "You're scaring me," I replied. Sunday, 2 p.m. Be there. Victoria posted an Instagram story that night. A photo of her in my bathtub, surrounded by candles, with the caption, "Grateful for family who shows up when you need them most." The photo had been taken in my bathroom, using my candles, in the tub I'd installed when I renovated. I screenshot it and added it to my evidence folder, which now contained 47 separate documents. Sunday was 3 days away. I spent those days preparing with the precision I'd learned managing hospital departments. I created a presentation with printed handouts. I coordinated with Patricia Chen to have the eviction notice ready to serve. I confirmed that Donald Wright would be available by phone if questions arose about his investigation. James asked me once if I was sure about this, if there wasn't a way to handle it more quietly. They humiliated me, I said. They threw me out of my own house while I was recovering from a breakdown. They chose her lies over my health. I'm not handling anything quietly. On Sunday morning, I dressed in the same navy suit I'd worn for hospital board presentations. Professional, authoritative, unshakable. James wore a tie. We looked like we were going to a deposition, not a family meeting. We were. The driveway at 2847 Maple Ridge Drive was full when we arrived at 1:55 p.m. My parents' sedan, Victoria's white Mercedes, Aunt Margaret's hybrid, and Uncle Thomas's truck. Everyone had shown up, probably expecting me to apologize, to back down, to be the convenient daughter who fixed things quietly and disappeared. I pulled a rolling briefcase from our trunk, the kind lawyers use for trials. James carried a second bag with my laptop and portable projector. My mother opened the door before I could use my key. Her face was tight with anxiety that morphed into confusion when she saw our setup. "What is all this?" she asked. "Documentation," I said, walking past her into my living room. Victoria was curled on my couch, the one I'd spent months saving for, wearing an oversized sweater and leggings, her hair in a deliberately messy bun. She looked up with wounded eyes, playing the fragile victim for our relatives. Aunt Margaret sat beside her, a protective hand on her knee. "Rebecca, honey, what's going on?" Aunt Margaret asked gently. "I'm glad everyone could make it," I said, ignoring the question. James had already set up the projector, aiming it at the wall where my mother usually hung family photos. "This won't take long." Uncle Thomas, seated in the armchair with his reading glasses on, studied me with the careful attention he'd once given courtroom testimony. "This feels formal." "It is." I opened my briefcase and pulled out 7 bound folders, distributing them around the room. These packets contain the same information I'm about to present. I want everyone to be able to follow along. My father stood near the window, arms crossed. "This is ridiculous. We're family, not a board meeting." "You're right, Dad. We're family. So let's talk about how family treats each other." I clicked the remote, and the first slide appeared on the wall. A photo of the house's deed with my name clearly visible as sole owner. On March 15th, 2020, I purchased this house for $425 new dollars to prevent foreclosure. I put down $180 US, liquidated my retirement account, and took out personal loans to cover the difference. The mortgage is in my name. The property taxes are paid by me. Every utility bill comes to me. My mother's face had gone pale. Victoria stopped her performance of fragility, her expression hardening. I invited Mom and Dad to live here rent-free because I thought we were helping each other. I continued, clicking to the next slide. A timeline of my hospitalization. On September 3rd, I was admitted to St. Vincent's Hospital with symptoms mimicking a heart attack. I was diagnosed with severe burnout, anxiety disorder, and stress-induced hypertension. I was hospitalized for 4 days and released with instructions for 6 weeks of medical leave and mandatory therapy. Aunt Margaret's hand had moved from Victoria's knee to her own lap. She was reading the medical documentation in her folder. 9 days after my release, I was asked to leave my own house. Click. The next slide showed my parents' text messages, blown up large enough for everyone to read. Mom, Tori needs the space more than you do. You're young and healthy. She can barely get out of bed. Dad, you're being selfish. Real family makes sacrifices. Mom, I hope you're happy. Your sister cried herself to sleep because of your outburst. The room was silent except for the sound of pages turning as people read their folders. Now let's talk about why Victoria needed the space so desperately. Click. Brandon Castellano's face appeared on screen, a professional headshot from his company website. This is Brandon Castellano, Victoria's ex-boyfriend, real estate developer, net worth approximately $12 million. They dated for 11 months. Victoria stood abruptly. I'm not listening to this. Sit down, Uncle Thomas said quietly, his judge voice cutting through the room like a gavel. You'll want to hear this. She sat, but her jaw was clenched. Click. The credit card statements appeared. In the final 3 months of their relationship, Victoria charged $67 to Brandon's credit cards without authorization. Designer clothes, luxury trips, jewelry. When he discovered the theft, he offered her a choice: repay the money in installments or face criminal charges. My mother made a small sound of distress. My father's arms had uncrossed. He was staring at Victoria with growing horror. She signed a repayment agreement on August 19th. The first payment of $2,000 was due September 1st. She hasn't made a single payment. Click. The agreement appeared, Victoria's signature clearly visible at the bottom. His lawyer is preparing to file charges for theft and fraud. He's lying, Victoria stammered. He gave me those cards. He said I could use them. I pulled out my phone and read directly from Donald's documentation. Text message from Brandon Castellano to Victoria Morrison, dated May 3rd. This card is for emergencies only. Like if your car breaks down or you have a medical issue, please don't use it for shopping. Victoria's response: Got it, thank you, baby. Aunt Margaret was no longer looking at Victoria with sympathy. She was looking at her with disappointment so profound it seemed to age her 10 years. Let's talk about the depression. Click. Victoria's Instagram feed filled the wall, a grid of pool parties, brunches, shopping trips, and professional photo shoots. These posts are all from the past 3 weeks, during the time Victoria claimed she could barely function. I advanced through the slides methodically, each one showing a different post with its timestamp and location data. Yoga class, Nordstrom, expensive restaurants, a yacht, a concert, a spa day. The quiet day at home where she was focusing on healing? Click. Taken at 2:47 p.m., her Instagram story shows her at hot yoga at 3:15, shopping at 4:30, and having dinner at a restaurant where entrees start at $45 at $7 p.m. Victoria was crying now, but they weren't the delicate, sympathetic tears she'd performed for our parents. These were angry tears of someone being exposed. She's not depressed, I said flatly. She's broke. Her major sponsorships dropped her when word got out about the theft. Her credit score is 547. She has collections agencies pursuing her for unpaid debts from Miami. She applied for 4 credit cards in the past 2 weeks using Mom and Dad's address. All denied. My father had sat down heavily, his face gray. My mother was shaking her head, but whether in denial or disbelief, I couldn't tell. She needed a free place to stay while she figured out her next move, so she lied. She told you she was suicidal when she was actually just broke. And you believed her so completely that you kicked me out of my own house while I was recovering from a legitimate health crisis. Rebecca, my mother started. I'm not finished. Click. The final slide appeared. Patricia Chen's 30-day eviction notice. This is a legal notice to vacate the premises. All three of you have 30 days to find alternative housing. If you're not out by November 24th, I will file for formal eviction proceedings. The silence was deafening. Uncle Thomas removed his reading glasses, carefully folding them before speaking. Linda, Robert, did you verify any of Victoria's claims before asking Rebecca to leave? My father couldn't meet his brother's eyes. She's our daughter. She was crying. She needed help. So does Rebecca, Uncle Thomas said sharply. She's also your daughter. She was hospitalized. She owns this house. And you chose to believe Victoria's performance over Rebecca's documented medical crisis. Aunt Margaret had closed her folder and was looking at my mother with something close to disgust. You've always favored Victoria. Always. But this, she gestured at the projector. This is unforgivable, Linda. We didn't know. My mother whispered. You didn't ask. I corrected. You didn't verify. You didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, Victoria was lying. Because she's always lied, and you've always covered for her, and I've always been expected to understand. Victoria lunged from the couch, her face contorted with rage. You smug bitch. You think you're so perfect with your career and your money and your... My house, I interrupted calmly. The one you're being evicted from. She grabbed a picture frame from the mantel, a photo of our family from 5 years ago, and hurled it at me. James caught it before it could hit, his face hardening in a way I'd rarely seen. That's destruction of property, Uncle Thomas noted clinically. In front of witnesses, Victoria turned to our parents, desperate now. Are you going to let her do this? Are you going to let her throw me out on the street? You're not going to the street, I said. You're going to get a job and an apartment like every other adult. Or you're going to call Brandon's lawyer and work out a payment plan, or you're going to face the consequences of your choices. I genuinely don't care which. My mother finally found her voice. You can't evict us. We're your parents. I can. I will. Patricia Chen, my attorney, is waiting for my call. The notice is legally binding. I began packing up my presentation materials. You have 30 days. Use them wisely. What about everything we did for you? My father demanded, anger finally breaking through his shock. 18 years we raised you, gave you everything. You gave me the legal minimum required to avoid child neglect charges, I said coldly. I don't owe you my house because you fed me as a child. That's called being a parent. I handed Uncle Thomas a separate folder. These are copies of all my documentation, including the investigator's report and the eviction notice. I'm giving them to you because I want family witnesses who can't claim later that I blindsided anyone or acted without cause. He took the folder with a nod. I'll keep these safe. As James and I walked toward the door, Aunt Margaret called out, Rebecca, wait. I turned. She was standing now, her purse clutched against her chest. I'm sorry, she said simply. I'm sorry we didn't see this sooner. I'm sorry Linda and Robert made you feel like you mattered less than Victoria. And I'm sorry I almost fell for her act today. Thank you, I said quietly. In the car, James reached over and squeezed my hand. That was the most terrifying thing I've ever watched. And I'm in love with you for it. I laughed, slightly hysterical. I feel like I'm going to throw up later. First, we're getting dinner somewhere expensive and celebrating the fact that you just destroyed a narcissist with a PowerPoint presentation. My phone started buzzing before we'd even left the driveway. My mother, my father, Victoria. I silenced each call without looking and opened my email to send Patricia Chen a single message. Meeting complete. Proceed with formal notice. Her response came within 2 minutes. Already on my way to serve them. Well done. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in watching people destroy themselves while I did nothing but wait. Victoria's Instagram presence imploded first. Someone, I suspected one of my mother's church friends who'd been at the house for an unrelated reason and overheard shouting, leaked the details about Brandon and the stolen credit cards. Within 48 hours, a gossip blog had picked up the story, and Victoria's comment sections turned vicious. Fake depression for a free house? You're disgusting. Imagine stealing from your boyfriend and then playing victim. Your sister is a saint for not pressing charges herself. She made it worse by trying to defend herself with a tearful Instagram video filmed in my guest bedroom. The room I'd painted sage green after careful consideration, claiming she was being bullied and that my own family has turned against me during the hardest time of my life. The video had 200 dislikes within 6 hours. Her follower count dropped by 8,000 in a week. My parents tried a different approach. Guilt. My mother showed up at my office on day 12 of the eviction notice, managing to get past reception by claiming she was there for a medical emergency. "Rebecca, please," she said when security escorted her to my office. "Your father's blood pressure has been dangerous. The stress of this is killing him." I didn't stop working on my computer. "He has 3 more weeks to find a place to live. That's plenty of time." "We can't afford an apartment. We're on a fixed income. You know this." "You could afford it if Victoria got a job and contributed to rent," I said evenly. "Or if you stopped supporting her entirely and let her face the consequences of stealing $67 from her ex-boyfriend." My mother's face crumpled. "She's your sister, and I'm your daughter. The one you hospitalized and then evicted." I finally looked at her. "Did you visit me once while I was in the hospital, Mom? Did you even call?" The silence answered my question. "You need to leave," I said quietly. "Security will show you out." She tried once more, her voice desperate. "What do you want from us? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. Your father's sorry. Victoria's sorry. Now can we please—" "I don't want your apology." I stood, gathering my files. "I want my house back. You have 22 days. On day 18, Brandon Castellano's lawyer filed criminal charges. The news made the local paper. Social media influencer charged with theft, fraud, and credit card scheme. Victoria called me 17 times that day. I blocked her number after the 5th voicemail, where she screamed that I had ruined her life by exposing her to that investigator. "I didn't expose you," I told James that night. "You exposed yourself." I just compiled the evidence. Uncle Thomas called on day 20 with unexpected news. My parents had been contacting family members, trying to borrow money for a deposit on an apartment. They'd been turned down by everyone. Most people had seen my documentation and decided Linda and Robert had made their bed. "Your Aunt Margaret suggested they ask Victoria to get a job," Thomas said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. "Linda apparently said Victoria was too fragile to work right now. Margaret told her that fragility was expensive and she'd have to get over it." "Good," I said. "They're going to try to stay past the 30 days, he warned. "They think you won't actually file for eviction, that you'll blink first. Then they're wrong." On day 29, I received a call from Patricia Chen. "They haven't started packing." I drove by the house this afternoon. "There are no boxes, no moving trucks, no signs of preparation. I think they're calling your bluff." "It's not a bluff," I said. "File the paperwork tomorrow morning." "Rebecca, formal eviction proceedings will be public record. It'll be in the newspaper. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my mother's text messages, my father's dismissal of my hospitalization, Victoria's Instagram post in my bathtub, using my trauma as content for her fake recovery narrative. "File it," I said. Day 30 arrived on a Friday. At 9 a.m., Patricia served the formal eviction papers in person, accompanied by a sheriff's deputy as required by law. My father tried to refuse the papers. The deputy informed him that refusal didn't make them invalid. By noon, the filing was public record. By 2 p.m., a reporter from the local newspaper had called my office, asking for comment on the story of a woman evicting her own parents and sister. "This is a private property matter," I told her. "The individuals in question were given 30 days' notice and chose not to vacate. I'm simply following legal protocol." "But they're your family," the reporter pressed. "Yes," I agreed. "And families should treat each other with respect and honesty. When they don't, sometimes legal action becomes necessary." The story ran the next morning. Property dispute turns family against family. Daughter evicts parents, sister. The comment section was split. Half called me heartless. Half said I was justified. I didn't read any of them. Victoria's response was to post another Instagram video, this time in front of my house, crying and saying she was being illegally evicted and made homeless by my cruel sister who cares more about money than family. She deleted it within 3 hours after Patricia threatened a defamation lawsuit, but not before someone had downloaded and reposted it to Reddit. The comments there were brutal. "You're not being illegally evicted. You're being legally evicted because you stole your way into someone else's house. Maybe get a job instead of filming TikToks. Your sister owns the house. You're not entitled to free rent because you're related." The court date for the eviction hearing was set for 2 weeks later, day 44 of what should have been a 30-day resolution. My parents hired a lawyer, some budget attorney who specialized in tenant rights, and Victoria claimed she couldn't afford one. James took the day off work to attend the hearing with me. We arrived early, dressed professionally, with our documentation organized in 3-ring binders. My family arrived late. Victoria wore ripped jeans and an oversized hoodie. apparently trying to look destitute. My mother had clearly been crying. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Their attorney, a man in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, tried to argue that my parents had an implied oral lease agreement and that evicting them was unconscionable given their age and health conditions. Patricia demolished him in under 10 minutes. She presented the deed, the payment records, the documented evidence that I'd paid every bill, the text messages showing my parents knew they were guests, not tenants with rights, the timeline of my hospitalization and their subsequent demand that I leave my own property. The judge was a woman in her 50s who listened without expression until both lawyers finished. "Let me make sure I understand," she said, looking at my parents' attorney. "Your clients were living rent-free in a home owned solely by the plaintiff. The plaintiff was hospitalized for a serious medical condition. Upon her release, your clients asked her to leave so that another family member, who had no legal claim to the property, could move in. The plaintiff gave them written notice to vacate 30 days ago, which they ignored. And you're arguing that evicting them is unconscionable?" The attorney shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, these are elderly people on a fixed income who have nowhere to go. Ms. Morrison is young and capable of finding alternative housing. Ms. Morrison owns the house," the judge interrupted. "Unless you're arguing that property rights are age-dependent?" "No, Your Honor, but family obligations are not legally enforceable when it comes to property ownership." She turned to Patricia. "Has the plaintiff followed all legal protocols for eviction?" "Yes, Your Honor. 30 days written notice, proper documentation, multiple attempts at resolution before filing." The judge reviewed the documents in front of her, then removed her glasses. "Judgment for the plaintiff. The defendants have 72 hours to vacate the property. If they're not out by 5 p.m. on Monday, the sheriff will physically remove them and their belongings." My mother sobbed audibly. Victoria stared at the judge in disbelief. My father looked at me with something that might have been betrayal, or might have been the first glimmer of understanding that actions have consequences. I felt nothing but relief. Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I took a personal day from work, and James called in sick. We wanted to be there when it happened. When my house became mine again, the sheriff's deputies arrived at 9 a.m. with a moving truck and 4 additional officers. "Protocol for contentious evictions," they explained. Patricia Chen met us in the driveway, professionally cheerful in a way that made me like her even more. "Ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for 47 days, I replied. My father answered the door when the deputies knocked. He'd aged a decade in 6 weeks, his shoulders stooped, his face gray with exhaustion and stress. He looked at me standing behind the officers with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're really doing this," he said quietly. Not a question. "You had 72 hours, I replied, equally quiet. "It's been 74. The deputies were efficient and professional. They gave my parents and Victoria 30 minutes to gather essential items, medications, important documents, a change of clothes. Everything else would be moved out over the next 4 hours and placed in a storage unit I'd arranged. I'd paid for 3 months of storage. After that, it was their problem. My mother didn't speak to me. She packed in silence, her movements jerky and uncoordinated with rage or grief or both. Victoria alternated between crying and filming the deputies on her phone, until one of them politely told her to put it away or leave the premises immediately. She chose to leave, climbing into her Mercedes and speeding away with a screech of tires that made the deputies exchange knowing looks. By 1 p.m., the house was empty of people and half empty of possessions. My parents' furniture, the pieces they'd owned before I bought the house, was being loaded into the truck. My furniture stayed. My dishes stayed. My carefully chosen artwork stayed. My mother paused in the doorway on her way out, a box of photographs clutched against her chest. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "I hope this house was worth losing your family." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not my mother but a stranger who had made calculated choices about whose pain mattered and whose didn't. "I didn't lose my family," I said. "You lost a free house. There's a difference." She flinched as if I'd struck her. My father appeared behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, Linda," he said quietly. "We need to go." They left in their sedan, following the moving truck to the storage facility. I watched them drive away from my porch. My house, my space that I'd earned and paid for and nearly destroyed myself to keep. Patricia appeared beside me. "You okay?" "Better than okay," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "I feel like I can breathe for the first time in months." James and I spent the rest of the day cleaning. We scrubbed every surface Victoria had touched, changed the sheets on every bed, replaced the towels in every bathroom. We opened all the windows despite the cold, letting fresh air push out the lingering scent of my mother's perfume and my father's aftershave and Victoria's expensive hair products. We found evidence of their occupancy everywhere. Victoria had used my expensive face cream and left the jar open on the counter. My mother had reorganized my kitchen cabinets, moving everything to locations that made sense to her but not to me. My father had been using my home office, leaving his reading glasses on my desk and his crossword puzzles scattered across my filing cabinet. By evening, we'd reclaimed every room. James ordered pizza, and we ate sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes of my parents' belongings that would be delivered to storage the next day. "Your mom's going to keep trying," James said, carefully neutral. "She's going to call and guilt you and show up places." "I know." I bit into my pizza, considering. "I've already drafted an email to be sent to all family members. It explains what happened, provides copies of the documentation, and makes it clear that I'm not discussing this with anyone who wasn't in that room for the presentation." "Cold," James observed. "Necessary," I corrected. On Tuesday, Victoria's criminal case made the news again. Brandon Castellano's lawyer had compiled additional evidence, including Instagram posts where Victoria had tagged expensive items, creating a timeline of her spending that directly contradicted her claims that Brandon had approved the purchases. She was facing up to 3 years in prison if convicted on all charges. Her court date was set for 6 weeks away. She called me from a number I didn't recognize, her voice raw. "I need help. I need a lawyer and I can't afford one. The public defender they assigned me is useless and not my problem," I said calmly. "I'm your sister. You're a thief who stole my house and posted about it on Instagram. We're related by blood, but we're not family." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Family shows up when you're hospitalized. Family doesn't lie about mental health to manipulate people. Family doesn't throw picture frames at each other. You showed me who you are, Victoria. I'm finally believing you. I was desperate. Brandon threw me out with nothing. Because you stole from him. Because you lied to him. Because you treated his money like your personal ATM. I was surprised by how steady my voice was. You made every single choice that led you here. And now you get to live with the consequences." She was crying now, those manipulative sobs she'd perfected over years of getting her way. "Please, I'll pay you back. I'll do anything. Goodbye, Victoria." I blocked the number. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor. Aunt Margaret, carrying a casserole dish and a small gift bag. I invited her in cautiously, still not sure where her loyalties ultimately fell. "I'm not here to lecture you or ask you to reconcile," she said immediately, setting the casserole in my kitchen. "I'm here to apologize and to tell you I'm proud of you." I blinked. "Proud?" "Your mother called me last night, sobbing, asking me to talk sense into you." Margaret's smile was grim. "I told her the only person who needed sense was her, and that she'd lost her daughter through her own choices." She hung up on me. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "Don't be. She's my sister and I love her, but she's been enabling Victoria since that girl could walk. And she chose Victoria over you when you needed her most. That's unforgivable in my book." She handed me the gift bag. "This is from your grandmother. She left it to you before she died, but Linda was supposed to give it to you on your 30th birthday. She didn't." Inside was a small leather journal and a letter in my grandmother's handwriting. I sat down at my kitchen table, suddenly unsteady. The letter was dated 3 months before my grandmother passed away. "My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, it means you're 30, and your mother has finally given you what I left for you. Or more likely, that Margaret has intervened because Linda is being stubborn. I want you to know that I see you. I've always seen you. The quiet one who works hard and doesn't complain. The one who sacrifices without being asked and then gets overlooked anyway. The one who will probably save this family someday, whether they deserve it or not. Don't let them take more than you can afford to give. Don't set yourself on fire to keep them warm. And don't ever apologize for having boundaries. Love, Grandma Rose." I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. James appeared from somewhere and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew exactly what I'd need to hear." Aunt Margaret was crying too. "She wrote me a letter as well. She told me to watch over you because Linda would favor Victoria, and you'd need someone to remind you that you matter." We sat in my kitchen, and talked for 2 hours. She told me stories about my grandmother I'd never heard, about how Rose had been the strong one in her family too, the one who'd made hard choices and been resented for it. Your mother will probably never forgive you, Margaret said gently as she was leaving. She'll see herself as the victim in this story forever. You need to be okay with that. I am, I said, and realized it was true. Thursday morning, I woke up in my own bedroom for the first time in 47 days. James had set up a new coffee maker in the kitchen. A fancy one I'd been wanting but never bought because there was always something more important. Welcome home, he said, handing me a perfect cappuccino. I stood in the center of my living room, holding the warm cup, looking at the space I'd fought for. The morning light came through the windows I'd chosen. The walls were painted the colors I'd selected. Every piece of furniture had been earned through my work, my sacrifice, my refusal to give up. This was mine. Finally, completely mine. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope you rot in hell for what you did to this family. I deleted it without responding and blocked the number. Then I opened my email and sent the message I'd drafted to extended family with the full documentation attached. Subject line, setting the record straight. By noon, I had responses from cousins, aunts, uncles, most supportive, some shocked, a few angry, but clearly not understanding the full story. I replied to the supportive ones and ignored the rest. My house was mine again. My life was mine again. And I was done apologizing for wanting both. 6 months later, I stood in my backyard on a warm spring morning, watching James plant tomatoes in the garden beds we'd built together. The house had been transformed over the winter. Fresh paint in every room, new hardware on the cabinets, updated light fixtures that made everything feel brighter. Victoria's criminal case had concluded in February. She'd accepted a plea deal, probation, community service, and full restitution of the $67,000 to Brandon Castellano. Her Instagram account was defunct. Too many burned bridges, too many former followers who'd realized they'd been lied to. Last I'd heard through Aunt Margaret, she was working as a server at a chain restaurant and living with 2 roommates in a basement apartment. My parents had found a small 2-bedroom rental in a less desirable part of town. They'd asked me for help with the deposit through Margaret, who'd refused to pass along the message. They'd asked Uncle Thomas for a loan to buy furniture, and he'd declined. Eventually, they'd accepted that they'd burned every bridge and would have to rebuild their lives with the limited resources they had. They'd tried to reconcile exactly once, showing up at my house on Christmas Eve. I'd opened the door, looked at my mother's hopeful face, and said, "No, thank you," before closing it again. They hadn't returned. The guilt people expected me to feel never materialized. Instead, I felt light, free, like I'd been carrying a weight for 34 years and had finally set it down. My health had improved steadily. The panic attacks had stopped. I'd returned to work in January with better boundaries and a new understanding of my own value. When the hospital asked me to take on additional responsibilities without additional compensation, I'd said no. A complete sentence that would have been impossible before. James and I had started trying for a baby in March. Whether it worked or not, we'd decided. We were building the family we wanted in the home we'd fought to keep. Uncle Thomas visited regularly, often bringing Aunt Margaret with him. We'd become genuinely close during the eviction process, bonded by shared values about accountability and consequences. They were teaching me to garden, sharing decades of accumulated knowledge about perennials and soil pH, and when to prune what. Your grandmother would be proud, Thomas said one afternoon, surveying our work. She always said the strongest people were the ones who knew when to stop fighting for people who wouldn't fight for themselves. My phone hadn't rung with my parents' numbers in 4 months. Victoria had sent a friend request on a new Instagram account she'd created. I declined it within seconds. Some people would call what I did cruel. Those people had never been hospitalized from stress, then evicted from their own property by the people who were supposed to love them most. Those people had never watched their sister perform fake mental illness for free rent while they struggled to afford basic medication. I called it justice. James called it boundaries. Patricia Chen called it the best use of property law she'd seen in 15 years of practice. I called it freedom. On a Tuesday in late April, a letter arrived in the mail, my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it, braced for another attempt at manipulation. Instead, I found a single sentence on notebook paper. I understand now why you did what you did. No apology, no request for reconciliation, just acknowledgement. I showed it to James that night. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said, and filed it away with the rest of the documentation from that period. Evidence, but not an invitation. My life moved forward, promotions at work, garden parties in our backyard, Sunday mornings with real family. Thomas, Margaret, the friends who'd supported me through the worst of it. Tyler and his wife became regular dinner guests. My therapist helped me process not the guilt, but the relief of finally choosing myself. Victoria posted on Facebook once, a long rambling status about forgiveness and family, and how some people were too proud to admit they were wrong. The comments were full of people who knew the real story, telling her to take her own advice. She deleted the post within an hour. My parents sent a Christmas card to Aunt Margaret's house, carefully not to mine, with a photo of them looking older and sadder in their small rental. Margaret showed it to me and asked if I wanted to reach out. No, I said simply. They made their choices. I made mine. We all get to live with the consequences. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't dramatic or cruel. It was living well in the space you'd fought to keep. It was knowing your worth and refusing to accept less. It was looking at what you'd built and knowing that every brick, every nail, every carefully chosen paint color was yours because you'd earned it. My house was mine. My life was mine. My peace was mine. And I would never apologize for protecting any of it again. Some families are born. Some families are chosen. And some families teach you exactly who you don't want to be. Mine did all three,